let's start with the very beginning. When did you decide that you became interested in music? Did you come from a musical family, or how did this come about?
Well, oddly enough, nobody in my family is very musical. My mother played the contrabass in high school, but that's it. The only one of my family or lineage that I take after is maybe my great-great-grandfather. He played the violin, but that's it. And he had a size 13 foot like mine and big hands.
So what does that mean?
That means you got big shoes and big gloves, brother.
So
No, it means the better to play with.
exactly. That means you have a better grip on maybe a 7 string than most guys.
Well, I know some guys that have a pretty good grip on that instrument, but I actually like having big hands. They're very large, and I used to sit in the mirror and watch myself play to develop my style. And I used to actually focus on trying to make them look very elegant, and it works. You know, you can actually finesse the way you play by watching yourself in the mirror. But I was always very, I think, more interested in music than anybody else in my family. And in the beginning, I was very attracted to compositional stuff like Bernstein, because that was what my parents listened to. And I wouldn't say classical music, but when my sister, when I was I think about 12 or so, my sister was listening to like Led Zeppelin and stuff like that, and that was it. That did it for me. It was Jimmy Page was really, and the music of Led Zeppelin was really the thing that pushed me into an obsession.
And now, was guitar your first instrument, or how?
Actually, I had a little spinet organ. Hey guys, I'm sorry, I'm doing an interview. I was doing I had a little edit.
Take two.
Take two. When I was 6, on my 6th birthday, on 6/6/66, I got a little spinet organ, and I remember going to it and hitting a note, and then going to the right, I noticed the notes went higher, and when I went to the left, they got lower. So I immediately was able to play melodies and stuff. It just kind of came together immediately. So that was my first instrument. Then, like all good little Italian boys from Long Island, I played the accordion for a while. Yep, Arrivederci Roma, baby. And then I eventually, I was afraid of the guitar. When I first I was always interested in it. I mean, come on, it's the coolest instrument in the world. I mean, it's just, when I was in school, either you, if you played the guitar, either you were cool or you thought you were cool. And I probably had some kind of a very low self-esteem. I never felt like I was cool enough to play the guitar, and I didn't want to fake it. So when nobody was looking, I got a guitar from a friend of mine. I was 13, and I just started playing it non-stop, and I never stopped. That was it.
Well, thinking you're cool is halfway to being cool, isn't it?
It's all in your confidence level of yourself. Yeah.
Now, from then, you went to a formal music education.
Yes, like I say, I was always interested in the little black dots. You know, they always fascinated me. The idea that you could take a piece of manuscript paper and write on it and have a whole orchestra just, at your beck and call. That's creativity. And I always wanted to know music. I always wanted to understand it. I was just fascinated with it. So I started to study composition and theory in like 9th grade. I wrote my first orchestra score. And just played the guitar a hell of a lot. It was in rock. But it was funny because I was writing this orchestra music and then playing Kiss, with my band, my friends. And yeah, it was everything. It was just when I think, sometimes I get asked, was there ever a time when you decided that you wanted to be a musician? And the answer is really no. There was never a choice. I never really felt that there was anything else I could do or anything else I really wanted to do. And I never thought I'd have any success. I thought at best I'd be the worst. But I liked it. I was very thrilled with having the ability to sit down and even play anything. I never played for anybody. I never let anybody hear me play for years.
So have you ever figured out what those black keys on the piano were for?
To throw you off.
Yeah, I never quite figured that out. No, I know exactly where you're coming from. My dad is a jazz pianist, and I grew up in that exact environment. So it was just, for me, as a musician, it's never been a choice. It's something I just always did. Now you went to Berkeley,
Uh-huh.
and did you go to another college before then, or did you go straight out of high school into Berkeley?
No, I went right out of high school, right into Berkeley.
Wow. And that was like a true boot camp.
Well, Berkeley was cool because everybody there was a musician. Everybody wanted to play. It was a very musically sharing experience, and the whole day was music. Either it was study or jamming, and we played a lot. We played all the time. It was great. It was just a great environment, and we just had we had the nerve to experiment with the weirdest stuff. We'd write this impossible stuff and just try to play it. It was great.
Now, at what point did you discover Frank Zappa as the genius that we know him to be and the legend that he is now?
Well, you don't really understand genius when you're 12. I think. I didn't. You just hear rumors. And I was always into Frank. And his music was sort of a culmination of a lot of different styles that I liked. Because I liked, like I said, Little Black Dots, but I liked guitar. I liked, the comedy element. But there was an intensity, too. And he was brilliant. He was really brilliant, I have to tell you. I mean, it's not a rumor, man. He's the most extraordinary person I ever met in my life. And I just had the freakish good fortune to come across his phone number from a friend of mine. And I called him when I was like 15 and didn't get through, so I waited a year. Called him again. He wasn't there until finally I was at Berkeley. And I called him, and he got on the phone. And his wife was very nice to me all those years, so he took the call, and he was in a good mood, thank God. So one thing led to another, and I ended up, he heard a tape of mine, and he was sort of impressed, and I decided I'm moving out to California. When I was 20, I moved right on my 20th birthday or the day after, and I just stalked him. No, actually, when I got there, I was working for him by the time I moved, because I had started to transcribe music. So, but every day that goes by, now that I'm an adult, I think about Frank, and I just think what he went through, and what the no compromise. He made his music in the face of every kind of adversity, and it takes a lot of courage to do that, no matter what genre you're in. Even if you're doing metal, or punk, or jazz, whatever it is, man. If you have your convictions together, nothing can stop you. And I felt that way. I mean, the stuff that I do is kind of left of center. That's what stimulates me. I like all sorts of stuff, but yeah, every day I think that I think of Frank and what he went through and how he created what he did. He's a historical figure.
Oh, no question about it. Absolutely.
I mean, when names like Britney Spears and I don't know, even Nirvana, maybe sound like names from the past. I think scholars are going to be studying Frank's music, and performing it. I mean, it's all great stuff, and good music is good music, but then there's those people that raise the bar. I mean, from day one to the end of their life. You know what I mean? 65 albums later.
Yeah. Now, I've had many long conversations with. I've done videos with Vinny and Terry and Chad and numerous others, and they tell me a little bit about the audition process and how terrifying it was. Everybody has very different but very similar stories. Can you tell me a little bit about your audition with Frank and how that came about, and who was in the band and how that worked?
Well, I sent Frank tapes and stuff, and he identified a certain thing within my playing that I think was useful for his band. And I don't know why, but I've always had the ability to play like weird, very difficult things. I'm not a shredder, but when it came to Frank's stuff, he would like sit at the piano and write this stuff, which is very un-guitaristic. But I would just sit and work on it until I was blue in the face, and I'd get it down, and it worked. So I had a place in the band. But he would constantly, I mean, my audition, I had to play him this one thing over the phone once, and oh my God, when I went down actually to play during the rehearsal, I thought, this is crazy. I'm 20 years old and auditioning for Frank Zappa. This is ridiculous. But I went down, and he told me to learn all these songs, and of course he pulled all these songs that I didn't know. you know. And he was so, you should ask Vinny, because Vinny was there, how brutal he was on me. I couldn't even believe it. He made it so difficult. There's one thing, and I know this isn't necessarily a Frank interview, but I'll tell you the story, it's great. This is during my audition. He says, and Frank would like play these things on the guitar, and he had a certain technique, but he wasn't like a shredder or anything like that, you know. And he'd play something, he'd say, play that. And I go, okay, and I play it. And he goes, okay, now, play it in 7/8. I say, okay, and I play it in 7. He goes, okay, now play it reggae 7/8. I'm like, okay, and I do it, and he goes, okay, now add this note. Okay, and I do it. Playing reggae 7/8, and I'm adding these notes. He goes, okay, add this note. And it was impossible. It just was physically impossible, not just for me, but for anybody. I said, oh, I can't do that. And he goes, I hear Linda Ronstadt is looking for a guitar player.
That's classic.
Give me an impossible thing, And at the end of the rehearsal, I went, and he was just other things too, but at the end of the rehearsal, I went up to him. I said, thanks for inviting me. I'm really sorry. I'm going to go home now. He goes, you're in the band. And I hugged him.
I saw you that first tour when you came through Columbus, Ohio, which is where I'm from.
Yeah.
And
that was a tough tour for me, man. Not because of the music, but because I was young. I was out on tour. It was all this stuff, all this staying up all night, and just. As this kid, I grew up in my bedroom, just playing the guitar, and all of a sudden you're out there, and there's groupies and all that stuff, and up all night. By the time I got to Texas, I turned yellow. I did. It's completely dehydrated. I was just awful. But he was always cool. He was always great.
There was a lot of us that noticed you in particular that night. Those of us who had seen the Mothers and Frank year after year after year, and you guys came out on stage, and you were new, and then this guy that looked like he was 7 years old, which of course was Chad, came out.
Oh, that wasn't my first tour with Frank. That was the second.
Oh, was it the second?
Yeah,
okay.
Vinny was the drummer in the first tour in 1980.
That's right, you did Tinseltown Rebellion.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember people saying, keep your eye on that guy. He's going to be a star.
Who, Chad?
No, you.
Oh.
Yeah, Chad.
Well, Chad is a star in that realm.
Yes, he is.
But,
now, after Frank, obviously, now at one point you decided you were going to move on, and you did.
After Frank, I joined. Frank, we did a tour of Europe, and it was a wonderful tour. But the last show was a bit of a disaster. We were in Sicily, Palermo, Sicily, and it was the first time a rock band ever played in Sicily, and the last. And as far as I know. And we played to 180,000 people in this giant outdoor soccer field, and it turned into a riot, and 3 kids got shot. And it was a terrible thing. And Frank said, I'm not touring anymore. This is it.
Wow.
And he got very heavily into the synclavier. So there was no use for musicians really. He was just focused on that. And so I went off and did other things. I finished up all my transcribing stuff I was doing for him. And I joined a band called Alcatraz, which was a metal band in the 80s. And they had Yngwie Malmsteen in the band. And, Yngwie Malmsteen is just this unbelievable virtuoso neoclassical type player. And so when I joined the band, it was wacko vi, play metal. And I brought a different kind of a color to it, I guess. And we made a wonderful record, really. It's called Disturbing the Peace, and we went to make a second record on Capitol, and I got a call from David Lee Roth. He was just starting a solo band, and Billy Sheehan, who was working with him at the time, had recommended me. We went down and we hit it off, and made a couple of records, sold millions of records, and had the best time you can possibly even conceive of touring.
Yeah.
Those days are over, man, and it's a shame.
Those were phenomenal tours.
They were dope.
It was amazing.
It was great.
It was an amazing band, actually.
It was a really good band.
Very good band.
Very good band.
And now, when that fizzled, how did you end up with the Whitesnake gig?
Well, Dave was going into some different things, and I wanted to move on, and I knew that all these bands I was joining and all were just really temporary because I always felt that eventually I was going to make my own music, and the Whitesnake thing just fell on my lap, and I decided to do it. It was a tour, and it was good fun, and I didn't write any of the music. I just came in and did all the guitar parts on the record. But touring with those guys was okay. Coverdale's great. He's he's an extraordinary singer, man. And every night he'd get on the stage, and it was wonderful to watch him. I mean, he was an animal, a real monster, And did some great shows, but it was what it was, And it was the '80s, I mean, you can do crazy things then,
Everybody had cool hair back then.
Or pathetic hair, but it didn't matter. You could wear the stupidest stuff, and it was great. It was just had the biggest light shows, and with Dave Roth, we actually had the biggest light show in the world. It's in the Guinness Book of World Records.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow, that I didn't know.
It was amazing, man. It was just amazing. And, but those days are really over. But I knew all along that it was, relatively short-lived, and I knew that I had become famous overnight, in the guitar community. And through it all, I knew that it was fun and it wasn't going to last. And I always had this music in my head that I wanted to do. So after I left Whitesnake, I just decided, okay, that's all that stuff is cool and it's behind me. Now I'm going to make a record for myself. And I made a record that I thought wouldn't even sell 10 copies, because it was an instrumental guitar record, and it was very eclectic and esoteric. And it was gold in 1 week. I couldn't even believe it. I walked into this radio station because I was on tour with Whitesnake. This guy comes up to me and goes, "Hey, man, your record's at number 17 in Billboard. It's gold." And I said, "Oh, really? That's cool." Because I thought he was talking to the wrong guy. I'm like, "Wow, that's great. Thanks, man." And I walk away, and I'm like, I go upstairs, and the DJ congratulates me and shows me Billboard.
Wow.
I just was stunned.
Now, how did that coincide with Guitar Player magazine putting the Attitude song on a...
No, that happened a long time ago. Long before that. The Attitude song was a piece of music that was recorded on my first solo record, Flexible.
Right.
And the Guitar Player was doing this new thing where they would put these little floppy disks in the magazine.
Right.
And I sent them, there was a culmination of things that really helped me to launch. There was, the Frank rumors and the things that I did with Frank. So if you're a musician with Frank, you all of a sudden have this, this reputation for being great.
Absolutely.
So there was that. Then there was the Attitude song and Guitar Player really blew people away. And that was a money punch, man, because that kind of, and I'm not, I don't mean to be patting myself, but that kind of guitar playing was really not done then. It was that song was kind of a groundbreaking song for its day. I had unique guitars to play that stuff. I chopped up my guitars and did things to them so I can even play that kind of stuff. And I'm not, not that it was superior to anything else. It was just, just different. Then there was the film Crossroads.
Right.
That did a lot too. I mean, to this day, people recognize me for that film. I was 25. That's 20 years ago. And, 18 years ago. And it's amazing what an impact a film can have. And then there was Roth and then Whitesnake. So when Passion and Warfare came out, there was a lot of hype. Luckily, it was a pretty good record. So,
Now, when did you first become aware of Carvin equipment? Was that before
Who?
Frank?
Just kidding. Jesus, that.
Steve Vai will be here all week.
Now, let me tell you something. When I was a kid, like a lot of people that want to be musicians, I was a freak, man. I would sit home all day and play a tennis racket to blasting Kiss, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, the heaviest stuff, Black Sabbath. I just would stand there in the mirror and just make believe, just like fantasize with all of my might that I was on a stage playing. So when you're and there's a lot of kids that do that. So anything you see with like a guitar in it or an amplifier, you're just like, it's like better than porn, And did I really say that? Okay. Anyway, sorry. Edit. Okay. So Carvin used to have these catalogs, and I guess they were smart enough and generous enough to send them out if you mailed in and they requested them. I was living in New York. I was 12 years old, and I got these catalogs, and I opened them up, and you just see these giant stacks on these beautiful like lawns, and I just look at them, and they give you this feeling, you know. It's like, I guess, you know, like kids now, they get on Nintendo and they get all, you know, all this stuff. That was what it was like, you know. You look at these amps, and it's just like every day is Christmas, you know, just looking at them. And so I always had this, you know, Carvin always had this mystique to me. And when I moved out to California and I started working with Frank, I never had any money, and I would always just fantasize about having a stack. You know, that was like the holy grail, having a stack, you know. And I guess it was maybe Frank. I'm not quite sure how it happened, but Carvin gave me a stack. And I remember just staring at it for about an hour when I got it. And I did a demo song for them, which was Blue Powder. And it was the X100B amp. And it was so thrilling for me to get that amp, you know. And I used it for years and years and years, you know. And then when I got into Dave Roth, there was certain, you know, there's a lot of pressure to use Marshalls, you know, and all this stuff. So I did. But I always knew all along that, you know, I have a particular taste, and I'm fortunate enough that I can identify with those tastes and make them real, you know, like with the guitars and stuff like that. So I knew that one day I was going to want to design an amplifier. And, you know, at the time I kind of, you know, I was at this point where I could work with any company. Marshall was, you know, there was a lot of companies. But there was something particular I wanted, and I knew they couldn't deliver it. And I tried. I really tried. In all due respect. I mean, those are great amplifiers, you know, all those other companies and stuff. But it just wasn't what I was looking for. So, and Carvin is you know, they're I say relatively small company, but it was quality. And when I got back in touch with them, they were ready to work with me on designing an amplifier that was, you know, custom to my tastes, and that's not easy. That's a tall order because I'm a pain in the ass, you know, because I don't know how to settle for anything else. I could never compromise, and it's as easy as, if it's not going to be a certain way, then just don't do it. And it's not an ego thing, you know. It's like, why would you compromise? You know, I don't get it. You know, there's other things you can use. You know, there's other things you can do. So we worked very hard for about 18 months at designing a custom amp, and it's for my taste and my you know, feel and the kind of thing that I like to hear. It's virtually perfect.
When you are in a position like you are now, you have played everything at one time or another, and so when you go to make the Steve Vai amp, what is it that you're looking for that you can't find another amp?
Well, you know, primarily I'm a rock musician. I like rock music, you know, and I like metal, you know, and I like, but there's a certain, you know, there's a certain abrasive nature to the sounds of amps that, you know, a lot of amps that I just don't like. You know, it hurts, you know, it changes your, you know, it has an effect on you, you know, and so there's certain things that I pulled out of that sound to give the sound. It's not softer. Softer isn't the right word, but more accessible. You know, and I tried all those amplifiers. I don't want to mention them, you know, but they all had a brittleness to them, and there was no warmth, and they weren't user friendly. You know, the way that I like to play. And I just worked on it with the guys at Carvin until the amp felt like a comfortable place to sit on. You know, and it is, and you know, it's the kind of amp that, you know, when I started playing it, I just didn't want to ever stop. You know, I just wanted to keep playing and playing because it was just very responsive. You know, I could turn things down and it would clean up, and it's simple. It's very simple. You know, it's not very complex. It doesn't have a lot of, you know, it's your basic 2-channel and stuff like that, and that's all I wanted. I mean, you should see some of the stuff that I've seen. You know, it's just too. My music is complicated, but the way I like to do things is not. I want to plug and go. Yeah. So that's how we made it. And you know, I was fortunate enough to be in a position with them where I can choose the fabric, and the everything, really. The knobs, the little logo, it's a Vi logo, it's my logo. The name, it's a real honor to have that, to be in a position where you can do all that stuff. I mean, how cool is that, man? And it sounds exactly the way I like. So
now, when you're sitting down and you're going through prototypes, now, unless you're have a degree in electronics, it's got to be frustrating or challenging to sit there with the designers down there and go, no, maybe more of this, maybe less of this.
I know.
And then they go back to the drawing board and figure out the electronics or tube combinations or whatever it is.
I know, it's like a producer that sits there and you're trying to understand what he wants, but he doesn't understand music, and he's telling you more blue. Well, luckily for me, George down at Carvin had the ability to translate, into his, very educated technical mind, my meanderings, my verbal, descriptions and stuff. But there was a certain amount of research that I did do. I spoke to a lot of world-class ACE custom amplifier builders, because I had all of them. I have, and I can't really mention, but all of the custom handmade amplifiers I own. And I actually spoke to people, very respected people who build amplifiers, and said to them, what is it that, and I got a good lowdown on it, and went to Carvin, and, we worked on it. It wasn't like, why does that amp sound like it does? Let's copy it. It was in this amp here, why is this like this? And I'd find out. I mean, we put a lot of time into it. In this amp here, why is this like this, Well, I like this, and why? And they would explain it. So then I would try to explain it to George. And, he went through a bunch of prototypes, and then we got it right.
And now, you've been with Carvin how long now?
When it comes to things like that, I don't know. I'm not very good. I since they gave me the X100B amp, that was in 1982.
Wow. Well, I think that one of the things that makes Carvin a user-friendly company is just about everybody down there is a guitar player.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
well, you know what else? It's affordable too, because they're not in a huge distribution network where the retailers are marking things up, 200%. So you get a lot for your money. And that was another reason I went to them, because the stuff that I usually design is not cheap. It's really like, I work with Ibanez Guitars, and we design a guitar with them called the Gem, and it's all the little nuances to it just make it very expensive. And it's the same with this amp. It would be a very expensive amp, I believe, if it was built by another company and mass produced and marketed around the world. So with Carvin, they're a family company, you know what I mean, and it's a good feeling too. People there, and they're not going anywhere. You know what I mean? They're Carvin. You know what I mean? Those are the guys, and they're wonderful people too, which makes it better. It makes it easy, and there's a a simplicity there in the way that they do business, but that they were the ones that delivered.
Yeah, indeed. And I've noticed that also that the people down at Carvin have a really interesting way of treating everybody like they're celebrities. I mean, whether you're somebody ordering a guitar from Des Moines or you're Steve Vai, you get treated with respect. I personally have ordered Carvin products since the 80s, back when I used to live in Ohio. And I would talk to somebody over the phone, and it would be the same kind of treatment.
Yeah.
And
well, that's because they're a family company. You know what I mean? And they're very conscious of those things. They never. I think that they, and I can't speak for them, but they've kept control, and they've kept the quality. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Is there anything else that you would want to say to the viewer of this Carvin DVD to express Carvin as a company and the people down there?
Well, I'm a terrible salesman. I don't like trying to sell anything. You know what I mean? What I would tell you is go out and try to find an amplifier that is your taste. But don't forget to try this one, because you may be surprised. No, you won't be surprised. You know, I think that when a musician or an artist finds a home, like when you get your first guitar, you just love that guitar. I always wanted to have a particular type guitar because my heroes played it. And when you get that thing, it's like home to you. It's like a warm place, Well, that's the same with the equipment for anybody. I think when you get that amplifier or that guitar that you love, it's like your home, And this is a great place to live.